The grand hall of the Imperial Palace on Lumeria Prime glittered with light reflecting off crystalline walls. Princess Vala stood tall before the assembled council of elders, her blue skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that revealed her royal lineage. Today was the day she would be presented with the candidates for her royal mate selection, a tradition as old as the empire itself. "The time has come, Princess," said Elder Mora, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You must choose a mate who will strengthen our empire. The future of our people depends on it." Vala nodded respectfully, though inside she felt a growing frustration. For 200 cycles, she had trained to become the next empress. She had mastered diplomacy, warfare, and the ancient arts of her people. Yet now, it seemed her most important duty was to choose a breeding partner from a pre-selected group of warriors. "We have gathered the finest specimens from the 12 most advanced species in the galaxy," continued Elder Mora. "Each one represents the pinnacle of their civilization's genetic achievement." One by one, the candidates entered the hall. There was Prince Dorn of the Arcturus Collective, whose armored exoskeleton gleamed with decorations from 100 battles. Commander Thal from the Nebula Dominion followed, his 4 arms rippling with muscle. After him came warriors from across the galaxy, each stronger, faster, and more deadly than the last. Vala watched them parade before her, each performing displays of strength and combat prowess. They crushed metal with their bare hands, moved with impossible speed, and recited their genetic lineages with pride. "Is there none among them who interests you, Princess?" asked her personal advisor, Lyra, when the displays ended. "They are all the same," Vala whispered. "Strong bodies, but where is the spark? Where is the one who sees beyond our traditions to what the Empire could become?" "You speak of dangerous thoughts," Lyra warned. "The Council expects you to choose based on genetic compatibility and political advantage." Vala turned away, gazing out toward the stars visible through the palace's transparent dome. "Perhaps what our empire needs is not more of the same, but something different." ******. Light years away, Lieutenant James Reed wiped sweat from his brow as he patrolled the perimeter of Outpost 7. The small human colony was barely a dot on the galactic map, a tiny outpost on the edge of explored space. "All clear on the eastern sector, sir," came a voice through his comm unit. "Roger that, Wilson. Finish the sweep, and we'll head back," Reed replied. He looked up at the unfamiliar stars overhead. Earth seemed impossibly far away now. When he had joined the United Earth Defense Force, he had hoped for adventure, maybe even glory. Instead, he found himself on this backwater planet, protecting a handful of researchers and miners from local wildlife and the occasional pirate scout. That evening, as Reed sat in the small command center reviewing security protocols, an alert flashed across his screen. "Unidentified spacecraft approaching," announced the automated system. "Classification: unknown. Size: large capital ship." Reed sat up straight. "Show me." The monitor displayed a massive vessel unlike anything he had seen before. Its hull seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and its design was far beyond Earth's technology. "Alert status orange," he ordered. "I want everyone at their stations, but no aggressive posture. This might be our first contact with a new species." Little did Lieutenant Reed know that aboard that approaching ship was Princess Vala of the Lumerian Empire, about to make an emergency landing that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The Lumerian royal vessel shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Outpost 7. Emergency lights flashed throughout the ship as damage reports flooded in from all sections. "Status report," demanded Captain Vors, his four-fingered hands gripping the command chair. "The asteroid impact damaged our main drive, Captain. We must land for repairs," replied the navigation officer. Princess Vala watched from her private viewing chamber as the small blue-green planet grew larger. This was not part of the royal tour itinerary. According to Imperial records, this world housed only a primitive human outpost, barely worth noting on star charts. "How long will repairs take?" she asked. "3 planetary rotations at minimum. Your Highness, Captain Vors answered with a bow. I apologize for this delay. Vala waved away his concern. Perhaps this unexpected stop will prove more interesting than another formal reception. As the massive ship settled onto the landing field near Outpost 7, Lieutenant Reed organized his small security team. 20 soldiers was all he had, hardly an impressive welcome party for what was clearly an advanced alien vessel. Remember, we represent all of humanity here, Reed told his team. Keep weapons visible, but not aimed. Let's show them we're cautious but peaceful. The ship's main hatch opened with a hiss of escaping air. A ramp extended downward, touching the dusty ground of Outpost 7. First came guards in gleaming armor, their skin various shades of blue and purple. They moved with fluid grace that suggested enhanced reflexes and strength. Then she appeared. Princess Vala stepped into the sunlight, her tall, slender form draped in shimmering fabric that seemed to change colors with every movement. The bioluminescent patterns on her blue skin pulsed softly. Reed felt his breath catch, not just from her alien beauty, but from the unmistakable air of authority she projected. Reed stepped forward and bowed slightly. Lieutenant James Reed of the United Earth Defense Force, welcome to Outpost 7. Vala studied the human with curiosity. He was shorter than her guards, with no obvious enhancements or genetic modifications, yet he stood with confidence before beings who could easily overpower him. I am Princess Vala of the Lemurian Empire. Our ship requires repairs. We request temporary sanctuary. Reed nodded. We have limited facilities, but what we have is yours. How can we help? Before Vala could answer, a high-pitched whine cut through the air. 3 small craft appeared on the horizon, approaching fast. Pirates, shouted Captain Vors. The Scarlet Band follows us still. The pirate ships opened fire, energy blasts striking the ground near the greeting party. The royal guards moved to surround Princess Vala, but the attack had come too suddenly. A blast hit nearby, throwing debris into the air. Without hesitation, Reed launched himself toward the princess, tackling her to the ground as superheated rock fragments flew overhead. He covered her body with his own, a simple protective instinct that would have seemed foolish to any observer, a fragile human trying to shield a being from a far more advanced species. The moment lasted only seconds before the royal guards recovered and formed a defensive circle. The outpost's defensive systems activated, driving the pirate ships away with surprisingly effective firepower. When Reed realized he was still lying atop the alien princess, he quickly rolled away and stood. I apologize for the physical contact, Your Highness. It was instinct. Vala rose gracefully, her eyes never leaving the human's face. Her royal guards looked outraged at the human's presumption, hands on their weapons. You acted to protect me, she said, her voice filled with genuine surprise. Even though your body is easily damaged compared to mine. Reed shrugged. It's what any of us would have done. Vala tilted her head, studying him with new interest. Perhaps humans are more complex than our records suggest. As the royal entourage moved toward the outpost facilities, Vala found herself looking back at the human lieutenant. In all her travels across the galaxy, meeting the genetic elite of 1,000 worlds, she had never witnessed someone act with such immediate selflessness, particularly someone with so little physical power to offer. For the first time in many cycles, Princess Vala felt genuinely curious about another being. The makeshift conference room in Outpost 7 had been hastily converted to accommodate the royal visitors. Lieutenant Reed entered carrying a tray with various foods and drinks, the best the human outpost could offer. I'm not sure what might appeal to your tastes, Your Highness, he said, setting the tray down. But I brought a selection. Princess Vala regarded the simple offerings with interest rather than the disgust her advisors clearly felt. She picked up a cup of steaming liquid. This is coffee, our most precious resource out here, Reed said with a small smile. Gets us through the long nights on patrol. Vala took a careful sip and her bioluminescent patterns flashed brightly in surprise. It's bitter but stimulating, Captain Vors stepped forward. Princess, the repairs are proceeding, but there's a problem with the quantum alignment coils. We need materials not available on this planet. How long will it take to obtain them? She asked. A supply ship can reach us in 5 days. Vors answered, looking displeased. We must remain here until then. Vala's eyes drifted to Reed. Then we shall use this time to learn about our hosts. Lieutenant, would you show me your outpost? Reed looked surprised but nodded. It would be my honor, Princess. The royal advisors exchanged worried glances as Vala left with only 2 guards and the human soldier. This was not protocol. As they walked through the small outpost, Reed explained the functions of each area. The princess showed particular interest in the common room where off-duty soldiers played games and talked. Your people choose to gather together in their free time, she asked. Reed nodded. Humans are social creatures. Isolation is hard for us. In the Lemurian Empire, privacy is considered the greatest luxury, Vala replied. Our nobles often go cycles without direct contact with others. They stopped at a memorial wall displaying photos of fallen soldiers. These are your warriors who died, she asked. Yes, we remember them, Reed answered quietly. Vala studied the images. They look so different from each other. Humans come in many forms, Reed explained. Unlike many species, we haven't engineered ourselves into uniformity. The diversity doesn't cause conflict. Reed laughed. Oh, it causes plenty. But it's also our strength. Different perspectives, different skills. It helps us solve problems. Later that evening, Vala joined Reed on the observation deck. The planet's 3 moons cast multiple shadows across the landscape. Tell me about Earth, she requested. Your homeworld. Reed described Earth, its oceans and mountains, its crowded cities and remote wilderness. He told her about human history, their countless wars, but also their art, music, and literature. Your species nearly destroyed itself several times, Vala observed, yet you survived. That's what humans do best, Reed said. We adapt. We keep going. He explained how humans had been considered insignificant when they first joined the galactic community. Too weak, too short-lived, too emotional. But they had proven their worth through ingenuity and determination. We build things that last beyond our short lives, he said. We pass knowledge to the next generation. We improve slowly but consistently. Vala's patterns pulsed thoughtfully. The Lemurian Empire has remained unchanged for 10,000 cycles. Our genetic perfection was achieved long ago. There is nothing left to improve. Is that truly perfection? Reed asked. To stop changing. The princess didn't answer, but her patterns shifted to a color Reed hadn't seen before. When her chief advisor found them still talking hours later, he was alarmed by the princess's intense focus on the human's words. Your Highness, you should rest, he insisted. As Vala reluctantly prepared to leave, she turned to Reed. Tomorrow, Lieutenant, I wish to see how your soldiers train. In the Lemurian Empire, we believe combat reveals one's true nature. Reed nodded, unaware that the princess had already begun questioning everything she had been taught about humans and about her own species' supposed superiority. Behind her diplomatic mask, Princess Vala felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries. The thrill of discovering something new. The training grounds of Outpost 7 were simple compared to the grand combat arenas of Lemuria. A rectangular field of packed dirt surrounded by basic obstacle courses and weight training equipment. Princess Vala and her entourage watched as Lieutenant Reed's soldiers performed their morning exercises. Your warriors train together, asked Vala, observing how the humans encouraged each other through difficult drills. We're stronger as a unit than as individuals, Reed explained. Most human accomplishments come through teamwork, not solo heroics. Captain Vors scoffed. Lemurian warriors train in isolation to develop self-reliance. Depending on others creates weakness. Reed shrugged. Different approaches for different species, I suppose. Vala watched closely as Reed joined his soldiers, leading from the front rather than simply giving orders. Though not the strongest or fastest, his troops clearly respected him. "Lieutenant, would you demonstrate your combat techniques?" Vala asked suddenly. Reed looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, Your Highness. Who would you like me to spar with?" "One of my guards," she replied, gesturing to a tall Lumerian warrior named Kroll who stepped forward with a confident smile. The princess's advisors exchanged knowing looks. Kroll was a third-tier combat specialist, capable of defeating opponents twice his size. This human would be humiliated within seconds. Reed and Kroll faced each other in the center of the training ground. The difference was stark. The Lumerian stood nearly a foot taller, his blue skin covered with honor markings from countless victories. "Begin," commanded Vala. Kroll moved with blinding speed, but instead of attempting to match the alien's superior strength, Reed dodged, using the Lumerian's momentum against him. What followed surprised everyone watching. Though Kroll landed several powerful blows, Reed never stayed still long enough for a finishing strike. He fought defensively, conserving energy, studying his opponent's patterns. After several minutes, when Kroll's attacks grew slightly slower from exertion, Reed changed tactics. He began feinting, using unpredictable movements to confuse the Lumerian, then striking precisely at vulnerable points. Though not powerful enough to seriously harm Kroll, Reed's attacks were annoying, like a small creature harassing a larger predator. Finally, Reed executed a sweeping leg maneuver that, combined with Kroll's frustrated lunge, sent the alien warrior tumbling to the ground. Before Kroll could recover, Reed had positioned himself with a training knife at the Lumerian's throat. Silence fell over the training ground. The royal guards looked stunned. Kroll had not been defeated in decades. "An interesting approach," Vala said, her patterns flashing with excitement. "You did not try to overpower him." "That would have been suicide," Reed replied honestly, helping Kroll to his feet. "Humans learn early to work with what we have, not what we wish we had." Later that day, as the royal ship's repairs continued, an urgent transmission arrived from the Lumerian capital. The Council of Elders appeared on the screen, demanding to speak with Princess Vala. "Your tour must resume immediately," Elder Mora stated. "The mate selection cannot be delayed. The candidates are growing restless." Vala's patterns dimmed. "Our ship is damaged. We cannot leave until repairs are complete. A new ship has been dispatched. It will arrive tomorrow," Elder Mora replied. "This primitive outpost is not worthy of your presence." After the transmission ended, Vala stood silently at the viewport, watching human soldiers going about their duties. "Is something troubling you, Princess?" Reed asked, approaching cautiously. "I must return to choose a mate from the selected candidates," she said. "It is my duty to the Empire." Reed nodded in understanding. "I hope you find someone worthy." Vala turned to face him, her patterns pulsing with an intensity that surprised her guards. "Lieutenant Reed, would you be willing to travel to Lumeria Prime as my guest?" she asked. "I believe the Council would benefit from seeing human combat techniques firsthand." Her chief advisor gasped. "Princess, this is unprecedented. A human has never been invited to." "Then it is time to set a new precedent," Vala interrupted. "Lieutenant, will you come?" Reed looked startled but nodded. "If that's what you wish, Princess." What no one but Vala knew was that she had already begun formulating a plan that would shock the entire galaxy. The royal palace of Lumeria Prime dwarfed anything Lieutenant Reed had ever seen. Crystal spires reached impossibly high into the purple sky, while anti-gravity platforms carried Lumerian nobles between floating gardens. Reed stood out sharply among the blue-skinned aliens, drawing curious and often hostile stares. "Your civilization is impressive," Reed said as Princess Vala guided him through a massive hall filled with three-dimensional star maps. "We have had 20,000 years to perfect it," she replied, "though I now wonder if perfection leads to stagnation." Their conversation was interrupted by Elder Mora, who approached with a delegation of ornately dressed Lumerians. "Princess, The mate selection ceremony begins tomorrow, Mora announced, pointedly ignoring Reed. The 12 candidates await your inspection. There will be 13 candidates, Vala stated calmly. The elder's bioluminescent patterns flashed in confusion. 13. No additional candidate has been approved by the council. Vala gestured toward Reed. I am adding Lieutenant Reed of Earth to the selection. Silence fell over the hall. Then, all at once, the Lumerian nobles began speaking, their patterns flashing in colors that Reed realized signified shock and outrage. Impossible. Elder Mora finally shouted above the chaos. A human cannot join the royal lineage. Their species is barely space-capable. I am Princess of Lumeria. Vala replied, her voice cutting through the noise. By ancient law, I may add any candidate I deem worthy. The other species will withdraw from the selection, warned another council member. The Arcturus Collective has already sent messages threatening to reconsider our trade agreements. Reed stepped forward. Your Highness, I don't understand what's happening, but I don't want to cause diplomatic problems. Vala turned to him. The mate selection is more than a royal tradition, Lieutenant. It determines the future path of our empire. For too long, we have chosen based on genetic perfection alone. She faced the council again. I propose a series of trials, not just of strength, but of adaptability, tactical thinking, and moral character. Elder Mora's patterns pulsed angrily. You risk everything our ancestors built. The genetic purity of the royal line has led us to complacency, Vala finished. Our empire no longer grows or changes. We simply exist. News of the princess's decision spread across the galaxy with impossible speed. On Earth, government leaders held emergency meetings to discuss the implications. Is this some kind of joke? Demanded the Earth Defense Secretary during a secure transmission to Reed. You've been entered into an alien breeding program. Reed stood at attention despite his confusion. Sir, I'm as surprised as you are. Princess Vala seems to believe humans have qualities worth investigating. This could be our greatest opportunity or our greatest disaster, the Secretary replied. If you somehow win, Earth gains unprecedented status. If you embarrass humanity, we could face serious consequences. What are my orders, sir? Reed asked. The Secretary sighed. Do your best, Lieutenant, and try not to start an interstellar war. Meanwhile, diplomatic chaos erupted throughout the galaxy. 7 species formally protested the inclusion of a human in the royal selection. The Arcturus Collective recalled their ambassador. The Nebula Dominion threatened military exercises near Lumerian space. That evening, Reed found Princess Vala in the palace gardens, surrounded by glowing plants that responded to her presence. Why are you doing this? He asked directly. I'm not special, even among humans. Vala's patterns shifted to a gentle blue. You are wrong, Lieutenant. When you shielded me from danger, you acted without calculation. When you fought Kroll, you used ingenuity rather than brute force. Your people build communities based on cooperation rather than genetic hierarchy. Those things aren't unique to me, Reed insisted. That is precisely my point, Vala replied. Your entire species adapts and evolves continuously. The Lumerian Empire once did the same, before we decided we had reached perfection. Reed looked at the distant stars. So I'm not really a candidate for your mate. I'm a symbol. Vala stepped closer, her patterns shifting to a color Reed hadn't seen before. The trials begin tomorrow, Lieutenant, she said softly. I suggest you prepare. As she walked away, Reed realized the princess might have plans more complex than anyone, including himself, fully understood. The great challenge arena of Lumeria Prime hummed with tense energy as thousands of spectators from across the galaxy gathered to witness the final trial of the royal mate selection. Massive floating screens displayed close-up images of the 3 remaining candidates. Prince Dorn of the Arcturus Collective stood tall and proud, his exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial oils. Commander Thal from the Nebula Dominion flexed his 4 powerful arms, each capable of crushing metal. And then there was Lieutenant Reed, looking small and ordinary beside the alien warriors. Against all expectations, the human had survived the first 6 trials. He had not won them through strength or speed. In those areas, he was hopelessly outmatched. But the princess had designed challenges that tested more than physical prowess. In the survival trial, while the alien candidates had relied on brute force, Reed had formed alliances with native creatures. In the tactical simulation, he had used terrain and surprise rather than direct confrontation. In each case, he had demonstrated something the other candidates lacked: adaptability. Now only the final challenge remained. Princess Vala entered the royal observation box, her formal attire shimmering with embedded crystals that amplified her bioluminescent patterns. The crowd fell silent as she raised her hand. The final trial tests not the body, but the mind and heart, she announced, her voice amplified throughout the arena. Each candidate will present their vision for the future of our empire and demonstrate their understanding of what it means to stand beside the throne. The Arcturus prince went first, his deep voice booming across the arena. Under my guidance, the Lemurian Empire will expand its territories across 3 new star clusters. We will perfect our genetic programs and eliminate all inferior bloodlines. Our dominance will be absolute. The crowd cheered, though Reed noticed the princess's patterns remained neutral. Commander Thal spoke next, outlining plans for a massive military buildup and the subjugation of several troublesome species along the Empire's borders. Strength is the only law the galaxy truly respects, he concluded. Together, we will be feared by all. When Reed's turn came, he walked to the center of the arena without the dramatic entrance his competitors had used. He wore his simple Earth uniform, rather than the ornate armor provided to him. I stand before you as the least qualified candidate by traditional measures, he began, his voice steady despite the hostile stares from much of the audience. I cannot lift mountains or live for centuries. My genetics have not been engineered for perfection. Murmurs of agreement swept through the crowd. But perhaps that is precisely what the Lemurian Empire needs, Reed continued. For 20,000 years, you have pursued genetic perfection. You have achieved wonders most species can only dream of. But in that pursuit, something was lost. The ability to change, to adapt, to see value in difference. The arena grew quieter as even the hostile audience members leaned forward to hear. Humans are not perfect. We make mistakes, we struggle, we fail. But from those failures, we learn and grow. Our greatest strength isn't in our bodies, but in our willingness to change, to try new approaches when old ones fail. Reed looked directly at Princess Vala. I don't offer conquest or genetic purity. I offer a partnership that brings something new to an ancient empire, the human perspective that perfection isn't a destination but a journey. Not uniformity, but diversity. Not stagnation, but continuous evolution. He gestured toward the stars visible through the arena's open ceiling. The universe is vast and full of wonders we haven't yet imagined. Why claim we've reached the peak when there are still mountains we haven't seen? The true strength of any civilization isn't in maintaining what is, but in imagining what could be. As Reed finished, the arena remained silent. Then someone began to applaud. A young Lemurian whose patterns pulsed with bright colors. Others joined, mostly younger members of the audience, while the elders looked on in disapproval. Princess Vala stood, her patterns shifting through complex sequences that reflected deep thought. According to tradition, she would now retire to consider her choice, announcing her decision the following day. Instead, she stepped forward, her patterns suddenly blazing with determination. I have heard enough, she declared. My choice is made. The crowd tensed, all eyes on the princess as she prepared to name the future royal consort and shape the destiny of the Lemurian Empire for millennia to come. I choose Lieutenant James Reed of Earth, Princess Vala announced, her voice clear and unwavering. The challenge arena erupted in chaos. Elder Mora collapsed into his seat, patterns flashing in distress. Prince Dorn smashed his ceremonial staff against the ground, while Commander Thal roared threats in his native tongue. Throughout the massive space, diplomats frantically contacted their homeworlds with the shocking news. Reed stood motionless in the center of the arena, as stunned as everyone else. Guards quickly surrounded the princess as angry shouts filled the air. She raised her hand, and the arena's sound-dampening field activated, creating an island of quiet amid the turmoil. "The council requests your presence immediately, Princess," a royal guard informed her. "Of course they do," Vala replied calmly. In the emergency council chamber, Vala faced the assembled elders. Their patterns displayed every shade of outrage and disbelief. "You must reverse this decision," Elder Mora demanded. 7 major species have already withdrawn from our alliance. The Arcturus Collective has recalled all citizens from Lemurian space. The damage is catastrophic. And yet the Empire still stands, Vala observed. Perhaps these alliances were more fragile than we believed. "The royal bloodline has remained pure for 20,000 years, another elder protested. "This human will contaminate everything we've built." Vala's patterns flashed with sudden intensity, silencing the room. "For 20,000 years, we have not changed. We declared ourselves perfect and stopped growing. While younger species explored and adapted, we remained frozen in our perceived perfection." She activated a holographic display showing the Empire's borders over time. "In the last 1,000 years, our expansion has stopped completely. Our scientific discoveries have dwindled. We no longer produce art that moves the soul. We simply exist, like beautiful statues, perfect and lifeless." Reed was brought into the chamber, still looking bewildered by the turn of events. "This human and his kind remind us of what we once were," Vala continued. "They fail, learn, and grow stronger. They work together despite their differences. They dream of what could be rather than worship what has been." "And what of the treaties broken by your decision?" Elder Mora asked bitterly. "We will build new ones," Reed said unexpectedly, stepping forward. "Not based on genetic hierarchies, but on mutual respect and shared goals." The elder's patterns flickered with surprise at the human's boldness. "Earth has little to offer militarily," Reed acknowledged, "but we have centuries of experience bringing diverse groups together, finding common ground when none seemed possible." "Precisely," Vala agreed. "The old alliances were built on fear and calculations of power. The new ones will be stronger for being built on cooperation." Later that night, as celebrations and protests alike filled the streets of Lemuria Prime, Reed found Vala in the ancient garden at the heart of the palace. "I still don't understand," he said. "Why me? I'm not the best human, let alone the best choice for an empire." Vala's patterns shifted to a gentle blue. "You represent something we had forgotten. That greatness comes not from perfection, but from continual growth. Your presence will force change, and change is what we need most." "This won't be easy," Reed warned. "There will be resistance, maybe even violence." "Already, things are changing," Vala replied, showing him reports streaming in from across the Empire. Young Lemurians were demonstrating in support of her decision. Several previously silent species had sent messages of approval. Even on Earth, people were celebrating this unexpected elevation of humanity's standing. "We are writing a new chapter for both our peoples," she said. Over the following months, the galaxy watched as the unthinkable partnership began. There were assassination attempts by conservative factions, diplomatic crises, and constant challenges to Reed's position. Yet slowly, something remarkable happened. The human approach to problem-solving began to influence Lemurian governance. Younger Lemurians embraced the concept of continuous improvement over static perfection. New alliances formed with species previously considered too primitive for notice. As Reed and Vala worked together, their partnership evolved from a political statement into something neither had expected: genuine understanding and respect that transcended their biological differences. The crystal spires of Lemuria still reached toward the stars, but now they were changing, growing in new directions, just like the Empire itself.